Our interview this morning is with Greg Thomas Wright, who was born in Bedford, Texas in July of 1977. He served in the Army, and I'm sorry, I didn't get your service dates.
1996 to 2017 until retirement.
20 plus years. He was a tanker, served in the Middle East, in all of those wonderful places over there. His highest rank attained was E6 Staff Sergeant. This interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Tuesday, April the 9th, 2017. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Greg in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also Operation Remember in Burleson, Texas. And with that intro, Greg, you can tell us about your time in the U.S. military.
Well, I grew up in Burleson. My parents moved out here in 1985 with me, my sister, and two brothers. We all went through high school here, home of Kelly Clarkson. I always tell that to my military buddies. My dad was in Vietnam, and my papa was also in the Marines, and so was my father. My papa Lewis was in World War II. Served in Peleliu, and I don't remember the other two places. Sorry, Dad. You're gonna be mad at me for that. But my families came from a long military line, and I moved up to Colorado to live with my mother, because my mom and dad were divorced. But I consider myself to have four parents. I moved up to my mother's house probably about my middle junior year in high school. Left Burleson, moved to Aurora, Colorado. What a shock that was too. From small town Burleson, I had one black guy in high school, and now I moved to Aurora, Colorado, and total culture shock. I'm going to school with black people, Mexican people, Asian people, totally not what I was used to. So, my first real job was at Denver International Airport when they first opened in, I think, 1995. And I found myself just bored, tired of the same old, same old. So my stepdad was talking to me about the Army and how it was for him, kind of where he went in the world. His favorite place was Germany. We talked about that a lot. So I enlisted into the Army. My mother was a little upset because Bosnia and Herzegovina were going on, and she thought her little baby boy was going overseas to go fight a war that we didn't really need to be in, so the country thought. Well, here I am, in 1996, I joined the Army. I go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, for basic training, and a lot of people know it as AIT, but it's all combined into one as OSUT, One Station Unit Training. I think it was 12 weeks long, a long time. And I thought I knew Texas heat in the summertime. No way, Kentucky has it beat. Humidity, 100% every day in the summertime. This old Texan boy was sweating his butt off. So there I was on this big bad machine, the U.S. Army main battle tank, the Abrams. I thought I was the cream of the crop, a tanker, woo! So, I graduated there in August of 1996 in the heat of the summer. And after that, I came back home to Burleson for 2 weeks for leave to see my dad and my stepmom, Beth. I call her my mom. It's all good. So, when I first got in the Army, everybody has this shell about them that they're invisible. You can't touch me. If that were only true 10 years later. So here we are on leaving Burleson. I met up with some old friends from school and stuff like that, and we talked about the Army and how cool it was. Excuse me. So I got stationed out at Fort Hood down in Tulane. And this is a few years after that Luby's cafeteria got shot up. So of course that's the first thing I wanted to see when I was driving at Fort Hood was where this Luby's was. And sure enough, it was all boarded up and not open. So I did to Fort Hood. My first unit was Charlie Company, 167 Armor, and 4th Infantry Division. They had just been reflagged from 2nd Armored Division to 4th ID. You know, I got to miss the days where they wore their division patch on their chest here, and now they're like everybody else and had to wear it over here on the shoulder. So that's the only thing that I was upset about. I wanted to see that patch on my shoulder or on my chest. So my first platoon sergeant was this guy named Sergeant First Class Puckett. He was a Sergeant First Class, totally approachable guy. He would salute all the officers like this, just he didn't care. One of those NCOs that had been in the Army for probably far too long and was just buying his time until he got out. And he retired whenever, I got there. I was there for, I think, maybe a year, and I believe he retired after that. My first gunner on the tank, the guy who was in charge of me, was a guy named Sergeant Torres. Total prick. He's one of those guys that you strive not to be like when you become a boss. Everyone learns from their bosses in the Army who they want to be like and who they don't want to be like. And probably it's the same way in the civilian world, but I haven't experienced that yet. So, my first sergeant was this guy named First Sergeant Henderson, a big old black guy, broad, muscular, and he talked out of the side of his mouth, and he had a gold tooth right here. And he was honestly the first guy in the military that showed me what it was to care for soldiers. I didn't know it at the time because I thought he was an asshole. So, that's my beginning history of the military. Within a year of being at Fort Hood, I was on Charlie 2-1 as a lieutenant's tank, and we shot top tanker in the brigade. Little known to me, that was a big deal. But I didn't know it at the time. We shot 1,000 points out of 1,000 points. The perfect score that you could get. And I was a loader on the tank, and everybody thought I was loading main gun rounds so fast. But I didn't feel like I was. But then when you play back the tape, and you hear the tank just boom, boom, boom constantly, and you think, damn, I did that. So that was my first accomplishment in the military, was that 1,000-point, tank run that we did for gunnery. Sergeant Caldwell was the gunner, and man, we fought so many issues with that old-ass tank. But we got it through, and that was probably the first gunner boss I've had that showed me how to fight through a tank. And I learned a lot of information from him that would pay off later on in my life and the career. I just didn't know it at the time. So, went to Kuwait in 1997 for Operation Intrinsic Action. Now that was the peacekeeping force, really, that was left over after the Gulf War was done. To keep a battalion, no, it was a brigade. We kept the brigade there through all those years up to 2003. And I just happened to go in 97. Talk about fun, doing your job, unlimited funds from the government. Nothing went wrong with the tanks. We had unlimited ammunition. I think that we shot 3 or 4 no-notice gunneries where you just pack your bags up, get on a tank. 2 hours later, you're on a tank range destroying Plywoodians, as we would call them, plywood targets. So, my first deployment, I didn't know what it would be like. Kuwait, all I heard 6 years ago when I was in middle school in Burleson and watching Channel 1 at Hughes Middle School was Wait, that's where a war was. That's where a war was 6 years ago. So, of course, I came up to Burleson to see my parents before I left, and I found myself crying and hugging my father, being scared. And he told me, it won't be like Vietnam, and you're fine. You're out in the desert, nothing's gonna happen. And sure enough, nothing happened. The most exciting thing that ever happened was a shower fell over on a guy in the desert and he broke his arm. That was it. So, you know, I learned a lot that deployment. I learned that at least one person should always be looking forward, because we ran our tank into a ditch, and oh my God, it hurt so bad. And off to the side, there was some infantry guys. We call them grunts or crunchies, because we threatened to run them over all the time, but we really wouldn't. So these grunts, this was 4 years in the past when I had met this guy, but he had met me before that I didn't even know. I met Roy Lewis in 2001 in Killeen when I moved off post. Lo and behold, he was one of those guys that saw my tank run into a ditch and saw my bloody face afterwards. So the military is really, really a tight-knit community. You don't know who you're gonna meet by accident or from tragedy. It was just cool that he was there and he saw that moment. I got married in 1999, and there's this saying that goes, if you don't have two of these three things, you're not a real veteran. If you don't have a bankruptcy, if you don't have a divorce, and if you don't have a DD-214, you're not a veteran. But if you have two of those three things, you are. So of course, I have a DD-214 now. I've been divorced, and I filed bankruptcy. So I fit the description of a veteran. So, it was a horrible decision to get married. Everyone was talking about contract marriages. If you get married, you get your extra BAH, which is money to live off post with, pay your rent, bills, stuff like that. You get your, you get out of the barracks. Who wants to live in the barracks? It was cool when I was young, but as you get older, it's not something you strive for, because as young kids, always partying, and it's a very drunk life in the barracks, and I didn't like that. So, I thought I was all grown up, but I made the best of it. In 99, I went to Korea for a month for this thing called Full Eagle. It's where we go over there and we act like we're the North Koreans and we attack South Korea. So we judge their preparedness and their readiness to take on the North Koreans by this exercise. So it's a big deal. And our brigade won. We weren't supposed to, but we did. So, at the end of this, when all the commanders went up to their after action reviews to talk about what happened, tell the South Koreans how we whipped their butt when we weren't supposed to. And, it just got real ugly up there. There was this high-ranking South Korean sergeant major, the top enlisted guy for a unit. He was punching people, he was belittling them, kicking people in the stomach, groin, just knocking the shit out of these South Korean soldiers. And a couple of them were fired, and the sergeant major, this top enlisted guy, was so pissed off that they lost, he burnt his Humvee down to the ground. God, he was so mad. So, I don't know what's happened with those other exercises after we came through, but we were the first ones to win that fight in a long time. So it made us feel good, but it made the South Koreans look bad. But at that moment, that's when I was glad to be a U.S. Army soldier and nobody else, because I knew that if we did make a mistake, we'd learn from it. We just wouldn't get beat up like they did, and it was hard to watch. And, after that, from the year 2000 to 2003 was a real low key time in the military. Nothing was really going on. Um, World Trade Centers came down in 2001. That was a real scary time. And the stuff we did at Fort Hood for that was just amazing. We shut all the gates down, took tanks to all the gates so no one could come in, no one could leave. I remember I went off post that day to go home, check on my wife or something. I don't remember what I did. Oh, no, that's not what I did. It was at 9 o'clock, 8:30 I was going to work. And, it was 9:30 in New York, and this had already happened. And I was playing the radio and I heard about it. And I got on the highway to go to Fort Hood, and the highway was backed up 10, 15 miles. And you just couldn't get on post. So I went back home. My ex-wife drove me to the one of the close gates. I climbed over the gate, get on post, and one of my sergeants that lived on post came and grabbed me, and that's how I got to work every day for a week. The soldiers was climbing over these gates to avoid the 10 or 15 mile backup at the gate because you just couldn't get in. And we guarded health clinics. We put the tanks at the gates, but none of us had ammunition. That was the strangest thing. I didn't know what we were supposed to do if we came across something bad. Throw our rifles at them, as we can run them over with the tanks. But and that just reminds me of all the stupid decisions that were made on stuff. The military, a lot of world leaders don't know how to read the U.S. Army because a lot of the stuff we do is chaos. We have a doctrine to follow, but do we ever follow it? No. And that's what makes us, I guess that's what sets us apart from the rest of the world. We practice and we practice and we practice, but when it comes to it, it's chaos. It's organized chaos. And, before the Iraq war kicked off and Afghanistan kicked off, it just seemed like that was it all the time. It was organized chaos, organized, chaotic decisions. And, the quality of leadership back then was great, but they didn't feel like they really cared about you. They more cared about the mission, which is, an acceptable part of the military. But I'm glad it's changed. So in 2003, Iraq kicked off. I was still at Fort Hood, same unit, same division, 4th ID. But when we were down there was 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st team, and 4th ID. 4th ID was known for a long time as the test division. We had this thing called Force 21, and we tested all the new equipment that the Army came out with to put it in the soldiers' hands to see if it would, do what it said it would do, to see if the common soldier could operate something, technology advanced in a simulated war zone. So that's what we were known for a long time. So we always had the best of the best stuff. And so when we got tapped to go to Iraq, our fellow division next door, 1st Cav, was pissed off because they were supposed to be first, but it wasn't that time. So I went to Iraq in 2003, what we always call OIF-1. It was the first, I guess, rotational unit through Iraq. We were there with 3rd ID, who fought the war, and 4th ID came up behind them and just mopped things up. There wasn't much action after 3rd ID was done, and a lot of it, we were just sitting in Kuwait, waiting to go, because what was supposed to happen was we were supposed to go south through Turkey, but Turkey wouldn't let us in. So we were tied up with bureaucrats, and we sat in Kuwait for a month. And then when it was finally time to go, we were excited, and nothing was there. But once we got to Baghdad, things have changed. You know, the kids were throwing roses at us. They were trying to give us Playboy magazines. They were trying to give us, you know, full bottles of liquor, and the people just loved us. It was just great. The feeling that we got from it was overwhelming. You know, they welcomed us into their country, and we thought it was going to be easy. So, I guess it's like a kid with a new toy. The new toy feeling goes away, so does the fun. So, we didn't have much in the way of food. You know, the supply system was really slow. In the middle of summer, we were rationed to 1 liter of water a day. 1 MRE, a meal ready to eat, a day. 1. We had never had to live like that before, and we didn't understand what was going on. 1 bottle of water a day, and in 100-degree temperatures. You couldn't escape the sun. You couldn't escape the heat. There was no AC. There was no cell phones. There was no buildings to stay in. It was on our tanks. And man, it was a hard life. Thinking back to it, it was so hard, but at the time, it didn't feel hard. Mainly because I think that we were on one of Saddam's lakes on the north side of Baghdad. I don't remember the lake name, but that thing was a lifesaver. We would take our baths in there. We would go swimming. And then someone on the other side of the country drowned, and all the lakes got taken away, so we couldn't go swimming anymore, and that's when it really turned to suck. People started getting sick. Dysentery happened. I don't know how many times I pooped my pants. You know, I pooped my pants in my sleeping bag. I pooped my pants on guard. I pooped my pants just standing there. It was so bad. So finally, it was bad enough. My first sergeant took me to the medics, and they took my temperature, gave me an IV, and they gave me these pills, and they were supposed to help, you know, get rid of the dysentery and help me stop pooping. Well, it wasn't. It was a laxative pill, so it made it even worse. So right then and there, I knew not to go to the medics unless you were dying. And I wasn't dying. I was just in a foreign country. We were having to eat some of the local food because we weren't getting enough from our military. And we had to start drinking some of the local water because we weren't getting enough water. So, you know, I guess it was just a real shitty situation, literally. You know, and food was scarce after just the first month or so. Our first Sergeant Santos came around in his Humvee. He had 4 or 5 places to deliver food to, and they were always tea rations. So each little outpost that we were at had their own can opener, and he would slowly do a drive-by, throw the tea rats out, throw the mail out. He said, "Come get your shit." So we ran over there, got our stuff, took it back to the tanks, and we lived off this loaf egg stuff and these little sausages for a month or 2. I don't remember how long. But the food was just getting so bad, we got a hold of pecani sauce somehow. And First Sergeant handed it to me. I took it back to the tanks. And then I was the commander's gunner. So I had a 3-man crew plus the commander, and the exos tank was there. He had a 3-man crew plus the commander. So I had a guy named Crawley, and he had a guy named Smith. And they fought over this pecani sauce. They were throwing punches at each other over this pecani sauce. So Smith broke Crawley's jaw here because he punched him so hard, and we lost that guy. He went back to the States to have his jaw fixed. So that was really the low point of that first 6 months, was watching these young kids fight over food. That's how bad it was. And, I guess about the third month in, by the grace of God, water trucks showed up with cases of water, cases of food. So the great meal strike was over. My first IED, not my first, but the first IED we had heard about. So this guy named Sergeant Gregory was on the other side of the lake at this other checkpoint on a bridge. And he told us that some Iraqi guy had ran down the side of the bank of the lake there towards the tank, and he said, boom, 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 and he pointed to a certain direction. So he took Sergeant Gregory's hand and forcibly moved him over here so he could see what he was talking about. Well, there was a little 80 millimeter mortar round sitting on the ground, and there was a wire running up the bank. So we didn't know what we were going to call it. We just called it a bomb, because that's what it really was. It's just a homemade bomb with military ordnance. So that was the first time we heard about an IED, and they were all, controlled by a device. You push a button, the signal runs down the device, or down the detonation wire to the military ordnance, and boom, it blows up. Shrapnel goes everywhere. Well, at first they were using 80 millimeter mortar rounds, and we were on tanks. So that was like, really? That's all you got? Well, that changed the following rotation we went on. So my first IED, I was the commander's gunner, and this was probably 6 months into our initial rotation. And we were at this pharmacy called Akai or something like that. It was a fortified pharmacy. It had, I think, like 12-foot concrete walls all the way around it, gates on both entrances. Like the perfect place to set up a little FOB, a little forward operating base. No one could get over the walls unless they had a ladder, and we'd see that from the guard post. So my first IED was at this town called Salman Pak, south of Baghdad, probably about 15 miles south. Was a rich town. Saddam had one of his mansions there, and then we dropped a 500-pound bomb on it and destroyed it. And after that, things got so quiet, I was tired of always sitting in a gunner's seat, slewing that turret around, looking through a little hole that big. So I said, Pierce, you want a gun? I'll drive tonight. He said, yeah, sure. So Sergeant Wright gets down at the driver's station. I start driving the tank around Salman Pak. No one told us what to expect with this IEDs because no one knew about them. It was all fresh, brand new. No one knew that, when the city's quiet, when there's nobody around, there's no lights on, something's about to happen. If you see a donkey on the side of the road, just standing there, something's about to happen. That's at a later time. So my first IED, I think it was a little bit bigger than an 80 millimeter. We don't know because at that time, EODs, the explosive people, were so undermanned and overwhelmed that we didn't wait for them. If something happened, either A, we killed the enemy, or B, we kept going. Or C, we waited till we got help. So this IED went off. It was so loud, it felt like there was a tank next to us shooting its main gun around. That's how loud it was. And I was dazed, but nothing happened. So I'm driving, and I'm screaming for the crew behind me in the turret, and nobody's answering me. So I think, this is it, I'm by myself. Everyone else is dead. So I give the tank full gas, and I just get the hell out of Dodge. So I'm driving, and then my tank commander, Staff Sergeant Siege, just recovers. And he said, turn this motherfucker around. So we turned the tank around, and oh my God. We killed the guy who did it with some animals too. It was always the hardest part. Not killing the people that were trying to kill us, but the innocent animals that were around or the kids or the parents. That was always the hardest part of doing our job. So, it was my first IED. It scratched the tank. Literally, that was it. I thought it was going to be so much worse, but there was a few scratches on the tank. So, we're invisible. So we were happy about that. Until 3 years later, I'm getting to that point. So, hand grenades. We're on this patrol in these Humvees, and there's I guess you could call it side bank on the road. Just kind of goes up like that. Well, there's these Iraqi dudes throwing hand grenades at us from the top of this road. So it was Pierce, Dezern, Sergeant Seach, and I think I was in the Humvee behind them. So they stop, and they're throwing our hand grenades back. These hand grenades that the Iraqi men had, they were Russian. And I tell you what, Russia has some little shit. Like their hand grenades, compared to ours, it was just poof. That was really it. And so we started throwing our frag grenades at them, and we killed one guy, and we took the other guy prisoner. We didn't have a way to bring him back to the fob, so we handcuffed him to the hood of the Humvee, and we drove him back to the fob like that. Probably not the best thing to do, but we learned our lesson with that. So, we get back to the fob. We get mortared that night. Somebody's launching mortars at us because we paraded this prisoner on top of this Humvee. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just young American kids trying to do what we needed to do. We knew that we have a prisoner of war, and we had to bring him back so we could interrogate him and figure out, the cells of the terrorist groups. Well, we didn't figure out nothing, so we let him go. And then next couple of weeks was fine. Nothing was happening. It was real quiet. But I don't remember that saying. What's that saying about the kids? If the kids are being quiet? I don't remember. But if there's nothing going on, there's something going on behind the scenes. We just didn't know what it was. So eventually we got forced to move out of that place. The Iraqis wanted to take it back over, open back up their pharmacy, and make it profitable again. And it was. There was a big problem with looting in that country. So I guess the only way that I could describe it is, imagine there's a spy outside your house every day, every week, every month of the year, listening to what your family's talking about. If you talk about your president the wrong way, you're going to get killed. That's how these people lived. The Fedayeen Saddam, that's what they call him. That was his group that ran around, spied on people, killed all the men and families because they talked bad about Saddam, or they talked bad about their country, or they told a lie, or they committed adultery. And I just think the situation our country is in now, these people here are so weak. It makes me sick to my stomach to watch the news now. After seeing what these people in Iraq went through, and these people here think they're oppressed, give me a break. So, we moved from that pharmacy to this old rundown Iraq Army hospital. And God, we bombed the shit out of it. I don't know why we would have stayed there, but we did. So, after it got bombed horribly during the war, the initial invasion, we took over it, it was looted. There was nothing there. There was no lights, no wires, no light switches, no plumbing, no nothing. They took everything. So we kind of rebuilt it to where it was usable. We tied in a water supply from our own water that was trucked in. So we had showers for the first time. And this is probably 8 months into our rotation. How we doing on time? Good. So we had showers for the first time, and it was great. And then we found out about suicide bombers. So there's this thing during the Army called a Bradley. We call it a mini tank. It's like a Dodge Caravan. You put grunts in the back, and they take them somewhere, and they drop off the grunts, and they drive off. That's what the Bradley does. So this suicide bomber walks up to the gate, walks up to the Bradley, and blows himself up right here in front of the Bradley, thinking he's going to do some damage. Well, the only damage he did was put bone fragments into this Bradley, and these soldiers had to clean this stuff out, and it was so nasty. I felt so bad for those guys. But, we learned more and more about the equipment we had, what we could go against, what we couldn't go against, by trial and errors from the insurgents. So we were slowly building up that invisible feeling. The tank's already invisible. The Bradley seems pretty invisible. So we're good. So that was my first tour in Iraq. Summed it up. It wasn't too hard, but it wasn't too easy at the same time. We didn't lose anyone from our company. We brought everyone home. And then my second tour in Iraq started in 2005, and we were still in tents. Most of the bigger FOBs had those containerized housing units. They looked like Connex things, and they had AC, and they had showers, but we had tents. I guess that's what you're trying to expect when you're combat arms, is you get the crap. So that's what we had, was crap. They were either like from India or Turkey, and they were very, very flammable. So, for the smokers, you had to smoke away from your tent, and I was a smoker then, and it was always a pain in the ass. But if you didn't watch it, your cigarette would catch that tent on fire, and then all your gear is gone. So on this new FOB called FOB Iskan, we had this Iraq Army, or at least Iraqi ran little store in there. They sell bootleg DVDs, so we could watch movies that were out in the theaters at home, but in Iraq. Some of them were good quality, some were crappy. They sold cigarettes, most of them were from Europe, so they weren't like the ones we had, but they were $5 a carton, which was a lot better than $40 or $50 a carton back home, and then having to mail them, and then they're stale because they were in the transportation for too long. But $5 a carton, can't beat that. But man, they tasted like crap, but they were good. They had that nicotine in them. So we're on our tanks again for this rotation, and I have this mine plow, and it has these tines that stick out from the front of the tank like this, and it's just a little bit wider than the tank on both sides. So we're getting this new chow hall dining facility from Brown and Root, from Halliburton. And it was supposed to be a real nice dining facility, but it was on trailers. And all these modular components for all these halls of the dining facility that were spread out were sitting on top of these trailers because they haven't brought them down yet. And I don't remember what we were doing, but we were out for a while, and we were so tired. We just wanted to get fuel for our tanks and go to bed. So we're driving down this road to go to the fueler on our FOB, and there's not very much space for our tanks because these trailers are sitting there with our dining facility on top of it. So my driver, Robbie Light, he opens the hatch, sticks his head out, and says, "I got this. Don't worry about it." I said, "No, you don't. We're going to turn around. We're not going to fit." He says, "Yeah, we will." I said, "All right, do your thing. Drive this tank." So we did. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this trailer just jiggle. I thought, "Stop!" So we stop, and I said to him, "I think we just stabbed that tire up with our mine plow." He says, "Are you sure?" I looked over there, and yeah, sure as shit, the mine plow sticking in this tire. So I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna get in trouble for this. So he puts it in reverse, and he said, "You know this is gonna be really loud, right?" I said, "Yeah." So he puts it in reverse, and we're starting to back the tank out. Boom! The tire blows. Oh my God. So we backed up off that road, and we were just, I don't know how fast we were going to get over that fueler, but we wanted to get away from there so no one would know it was us. Well, I'm waiting in line to get fuel, and here comes my first sergeant. First Sergeant King. Man, one of the best first sergeants I've ever had. And he is storming over to my tank, and I know it's coming. He is going to rip my ass. So he gets over there. He's probably about 5 feet from the tank. And these mortar rounds start falling right in front of us at the fuel tanker. And First Sergeant just takes it off running towards our tank, does some sort of leap, and just leaps into the turret and closes the hatch. And he looks at me and says, "Did you stab that tire?" I said, "Yes, First Sergeant." He said, "Don't ever do that again. Mortar saved your ass, right?" Oh my God, the only time I've been excited about being mortared was that time right there. Man, to those insurgents saved my ass. So that was that. And then we took over this place. This is when, like, Cops Combat Outpost was getting real popular to use. The war was getting out of hand. The surge had just been introduced. So there was a lot of troops in Iraq. So we slowly figured out that staying at our big super FOB bases wasn't working because we had no eyes in the area we were with. So they had time to plant these IEDs. They had time to cover the wires. They had time to rehearse how they were going to attack us. So we went over there the second time in 2006, and we started this COP called the Island. And the reason why we call it an island is it was off the Euphrates River, and there was a little chunk of land, and it was almost surrounded by a moat. You know, to the east was the Euphrates River, and then to the west was the moat, and you couldn't get into the house unless you crossed the bridge. We laid a bridge down. It's called an AVLB. I don't know what it stands for, but it's a bridge that we cross rivers with. So that's what we did. And we took over this house. It was an insurgent house. Kicked the people out, said, "Don't come back." And they didn't. So we lived in that house for the majority of the time that we were there. We did patrols from it. We switched out platoons with it. And we had a rotation of 3 days out there at the island house, 3 days on the FOB with guard and chow runs. And then we had a QRF mission for 3 days. So it was always a cycle of those days. And you got used to it, and it started getting easier, and you have a routine now. But, you know, February 2006 was my second IED. And Sergeant Phillips, the lead tank, ran over a pressure plate IED. And a pressure plate IED is the detonator is as thick as this piece of paper right here. You can't see it. You can't really know where it is unless it's right on the pavement, and they would never do that. So he ran over this pressure plate IED, and when the EOD showed up, you know, I get on the ground with him, and I'm looking around, and I find this broomstick on the road, and I said, "Is this it?" She says, "Oh no, honey, that's too big." So she finds the pressure plate and shows it to me, and it's just this piece of real thin bamboo with copper wire right on both sides of it. with some tape in between. The tape would keep the copper wire from touching, but I swear to God, a fly could land on that, and it'd be enough weight to set it off. I don't know how they didn't kill themselves all the time setting these things up. So that was our first, I guess, medical casualty. Was Varner, was Sergeant Phillips' tank driver. The tank was punctured by this IED. So we weren't visible anymore, and we knew it. So time went on. We were on Route Patty in Iraq. Everything was called evil. We had the evil strip, which was a strip of road probably a kilometer long. You know, anything in that strip was bad. Expect to be hit by an IED in that strip. And then we had the evil hole, which later became Robbie's hole. I'll get to that here in a second. And then up from there was the evil culvert. You know, everything in that area of that culvert was bad. You would get killed in that area of the culvert. You would get killed in the area of that strip. And you would get killed on the evil hole. So we had these three hot spots all the time, just constantly. IED after IED after IED after IED after IED. It was just getting so ridiculous. And then I hit my first big IED, May 1st, 2006. Pressure plate. The evil hole. You know, I blamed myself so much for that night. You know, before we'd always stop. I'd always shine the light down there on it. Really just thoroughly checked it out. But this night we didn't. You know, we had been gone off of our patrol base for, I guess, about 4 days. Minimal people were on it. 101st Airborne raped an Iraqi woman. Probably 2 or 3 months before this. Raped 2 or 3 Iraqi women. I don't know why. I don't know why they did it. But we paid the price for it that night. Because we were gone, having to set up an outer cordon around 2 101st Airborne soldiers that were killed. You know, these guys fell asleep on a bridge in their Humvee. Insurgents came, overran their Humvee, grabbed 2 of these 101st Airborne soldiers, dragged them through the town, killed them, mutilated their bodies, set them on fire, booby-trapped them in the street. We had to go get them. Can't leave soldiers behind. So for that 4 days, we were set up the outer cordon around, you know, these 2 101st Airborne soldiers where we thought that they were. So that took our manning power away from our little patrol base, which means that all those three evil places were out of control. So in the evil hole, now Robbie's hole, they dug underneath the road 6 155 millimeter mortar rounds, 80 pounds of C4, destroyed our tank. Destroyed it. You know, ripped the track off, shot 80-pound road wheels 100, 200 feet away, 900-pound skirts 300 or 400 feet away, killed my driver, Robbie. You know, it broke my gunner's legs because the turret floor bowed up and crushed his knees and crushed his ankles. Knocked me out for about 5 seconds and knocked my loader out until I woke him up. That was the loudest I've ever screamed a soldier's name. Just constantly screaming, "Light, light, Robbie, Robbie." It was so dark, all the lights went out in the tank. I panicked. So thank God for training and the training that we do, because 10 seconds later, it all came flooding back. I popped my red flare, and some guys from the tanks behind me came up and helped me, you know, get Luciano out of the turret and get Rutan off the turret. And we got to the Black Hawk and got medevaced, and then they took the scene over from there. So that was a real low point in my life. You know, all the what ifs. What did I do wrong? Why didn't we stop? Why didn't I shine the light? Why 101st Airborne Division? Why? At that point, I lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. Well, I came home on leave. I talked to Robbie Light's mom on the phone. And man, what a great family he has. To be included and supported by a lost brother's family is just the most amazing thing I think I've ever been through. So, Beverly, when you see this, I love you. So, after that, it was chaotic. We had snipers all the time with us now. We dropped the snipers off at night, and we were bound and determined to get control any way possible, and we did. And, from there on out, it seemed pretty quiet on the road. And then we thought it was okay. So, go back to the positive side of the story. This camel starts walking up, crosses the moat somehow, and gets tied up in our concertina razor wire. So this camel's thrashing in this wire and can't get himself loose, and he's just cutting his legs to hell. So I run over there. I don't want to release a name because he'll get horrified from this. But I ran over there with this other guy, and I said, "You got your pistol?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Kill that camel." He said, "Why?" Because he can't get out. He's suffering badly. Kill the camel. So he shoots the camel, and then he takes his knife out and chops the camel's ear off. And he starts running around like he's crazy, running around with his ear on. And man, that was a good icebreaker. It's what we needed. Unfortunately for that camel, he had to die, but it kind of brought the reality back that we're still alive. Let's finish what we started. And so we started doing that, finishing what we had started. And then, things were getting back to whatever normal could be. And then we started getting all this summer vegetation on the island, and we couldn't see out to the road. So we had this great idea to spray this stuff. I hope it wasn't Agent Orange, but it's still around. That was supposed to kill off the shrubbery, and it did. It killed it off. It was dead 2 days later. We could finally see the road. Well, it didn't last long enough. So then we brought this fueler truck out, took the nozzle off the fueler, turned it on high, and just shot fuel everywhere, all along the side of the road. We lit it on fire. And I'm out there with this fuel truck, with this guy named Willis, Perez, DeMore, a whole bunch of us out there. And we're just watching it burn, just adding fuel to the fire. And then, boom, this IED blows up right in front of us. So it was a propane tank, and it was right by this fueler. We're right by the fueler. So we think that we're all dead. So I start screaming, lay down, because we didn't have our pistols with us, or our rifles. All we had was our pistols, and our tanks were, a few feet away in effective range to help us. So we all lay down on the ground, and I hear this thing fly through the air, so I know it's shrapnel. Where's it gonna land? Where's it gonna land? Where's it gonna land? So it lands on Willis's foot, just tink. And I think, holy shit, we almost got killed. So nothing happened. We're screaming, hooting, and hollering, and the excitement's going, and adrenaline's back, and we feel alive. Man, I've never had an adrenaline rush like I have during a war. It's the most amazing time. So, after that, things started calming down. We lost our first sergeant from the IED. His gunner, the engineer that was going to come check on this island. And after we lost them, our commanding general said shut it down. So we put all the tanks online and aimed all the gun tubes at that house and just destroyed it. What a lost mission we had. We lost our mission. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to act. Everything we fought for was gone in a blink of an eye. So we came home, defeated, demons, all of it. I think our whole company was mentally destroyed. And 2007 I went back, or 2008 I went back. You know, it wasn't that bad. And it was a real quick trip, I thought. Nothing really happened. I got divorced. I met my wife when I moved to Fort Knox. Got married in 2012. Her name's Samantha. The best woman I've ever known in the world. I'm so glad we got married. I went to Korea for a year, had fun. Not the time of my life, but close to it. Moved to Fort Bliss. Finished out my time in the Army there. Retired in 2016 in June. Came home to Burleson. And we're laying down roots now. We're out in Weatherford. And I think we're moving to Granbury soon. So, war never ends until you die. That's when the war ends. So that's my story. Thanks for listening.
Good story, detailed story.
Yes.
We don't normally talk to someone whose memories are as recent as yours, and certainly that shows in your narrative.
Yeah.
A couple questions, and I didn't mention it. We have to go a minimum 30 minutes, but we're getting close to the top limit. You went a lot longer than most folks do.
Well,
but that's fine.
I did this.
You were prepared.
I
and-
figured that I
yeah,
needed to write my notes down and just
Yeah.
go through that.
Good deal. Let me ask just a couple things. When you went to Knox first time, high school kid, working the airline or the airport at Denver, enlist, boot camp. The first couple weeks, I mean, they don't take you out in the first week or two and say, this is your tank and this is what you're going to do.
No, they don't.
They put you on the grinder, they take you out to rifle range, they do all those things that they do with a normal GI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get you to be a soldier first,
Okay.
and then they start incorporating some of the tanks. And then it almost transitions from soldiering to tanking, but with the drill sergeant still there. So you would pay attention.
How'd you adapt to that military discipline? Is that pretty easy for you?
It was. I was always a good kid. You know, Rex, my mother's husband, kind of set me up for success about that. Because when I moved in with them, you know, I had a schedule, a very strict schedule to follow. I didn't know it at the time, but he was building the military into me. So, the whole respect thing and the listening to orders was kind of instilled both from, you know, my father and stepmom, Beth, and my mother and my stepdad, Rex. You know, I didn't have a hardcore childhood, but I knew to listen, pay attention, and be a nice person. So all those things kind of transitioned into the military for me.
Let me ask you a couple things. Milton and I have never been in an Abrams. How many guys in an Abrams?
4. 3 in the turret and 1 by himself down inside. You got the turret, you got the hull. So you got 3 up here where the gun moves, and you got the driver down here where the tank moves.
Claustrophobia ever a problem?
Not for me.
Is it for some guys?
For some. Motion sickness for some.
Motion sickness.
Yeah, but
Because you don't see outside.
yeah, and especially for the gunner, because you're sitting there and you feel all the moves of the tank, and you're looking through this little hole outside.
You got a driver and 3 other guys.
Mm-hmm.
What do those 3 guys do?
You have a driver who drives the tank, steers it through all the navigation requirements, finds cover, concealment, stuff like that. You have the loader who loads the main gun. He also has a 7.62 machine gun on top that's mounted on a mount, free swivel. And then you have your gunner who fires the cannon. He's got a coaxial mounted machine gun that he also fires. And then you got your tank commander that's overall responsible for the tank, deciding which targets need to be engaged first. The ultimate decider in friendly or foe. The boss.
Is the gun, cannon, whatever you call it, is it electronically controlled?
Yes.
Yes.
Through a computer system.
Yeah.
But it can also be manually controlled
Sighted.
if you lose all your stuff from enemy fire.
Somewhere in here you mentioned that you were a loader early on.
I was.
Okay, so I guess you pull this out of a magazine somewhere.
Yeah,
How big is the piece that you're moving? How heavy is it?
The Sabo rounds are probably about 40 to 50 pounds.
Okay.
Those are the dart rounds that we use for tanks, straight path. And then the heat rounds, the high explosive rounds, are used for like personnel carriers, bunkers, stuff like that. Those weigh about 80 rounds, or 80 pounds. And they're kept back in a sealed honeycomb. The door opens hydraulically, so it's separated from the crew compartment in case it blows up. It won't blow you up with it.
I assume that the turret, the whole inside is air conditioned. I don't know how effectively, but
Air conditioned for the components,
okay.
not for us. So on a hot day, it'll bring it down to 80 degrees. So that's better than nothing. But if it doesn't work, it's horrible.
What's the size of this gun?
120 millimeter.
120. That's a pretty big piece.
Yeah, a big piece.
Well,
Pretty
if you're
powerful.
firing an 80-pound high explosive round, that's a lot of bang there.
It is a lot of bang.
What kind of range?
We can shoot out to 5,000 meters. So that's about 2.5 miles. Long ways.
Okay. You didn't mention it. I assume you have a Purple Heart, sir?
Nope, no Purple Heart. The only thing I got from that night of the IED was busted lip stitches. So,
In your mind, were you eligible?
I was eligible, and an award was turned in for me, but I didn't feel I earned it because of the situation we were in.
Well,
So
certainly
I didn't pursue it.
you were in a bad situation,
Yeah.
that you were relatively lucky.
And if a young man that gets killed gets a Purple Heart, why do I need one?
Well, sir, 20 interesting years.
It has been. Learning to live again. It's been a challenge, but
That
I'm getting there.
you go to the VA on a regular basis?
I do. I go to the VA Fort Worth Clinic over here in Fort Worth off
Yep.
820. It's nice.
Yeah.
I'm well taken care of, well compensated for what I've been through. And the VA over in Dallas, it needs some work smell-wise. But it's good thing. I can't complain. You know, I see these horror stories on the news, and I know it's out there, but
You enrolled in a PTSD program?
I have. It's pretty good.
You knew Lauren's story perchance?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't.
He's a Vietnam guy, same situation.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. Anyway, we thank you for coming down. Thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
And I think that concludes